Clink. That tiny sound exploded like a gunshot on a serene Saturday afternoon, right in the middle of an elite gathering at the Vanderbilt estate, a seaside mansion in the Hamptons, where Italian marble floors reflected sunlight like mirrors gilded in gold. But in that moment, the entire party fell into a strange kind of silence. Eli Washington stood near the serving area, still holding a polished silver tray, his eyes fixed on the infinity pool. He didn't hear a scream, only saw everyone freeze as if the tragedy unfolding before them wasn't something to intervene in, but a grotesque work of art they were silently admiring. Sophia Vanderbilt, a 15-year-old girl with golden hair now soaked and heavy, was sinking. The hydraulic lift on her wheelchair had jammed halfway, dragging her frail body into the deep. Her eyes, wide with panic, turned upward in a silent plea. Her thin fingers clawed the air, an urgent signal no one moved quickly enough to understand. Eli had stood still, just like everyone else. But in that instant, his heart detonated. He didn't see a wealthy heiress. He saw a drowning child. And he saw the people around him, ladies with Chanel sunglasses, men in pristine linen suits, merely raise their hands to their mouths. Their fear was well-mannered. A wave of shame surged through Eli, not for himself, but for this entire society where a pair of shoes could be worth more than a human life. He didn't think. He moved. The silver tray crashed onto the marble floor with a piercing clang, shattering the spell over the space. Eli lunged toward the pool's edge, shoes flying off his wrinkled shirt, clinging to his skin as he cut through the water like an arrow. The crystalline water enveloped him, cold as truth. In that moment, all labels vanished no longer. The maid's son, no longer the shadow in the background, just a human being fighting for another's life. Underwater, his hand reached for Sophia. Her body was limp, her lungs already full. He grabbed her and kicked hard against the pool wall. Every movement felt slow, like the world was watching through a submerged pane of glass. Eli wouldn't remember how they got back to the surface, only the feeling of her frail hands clutching his arm, the choking coughs through water, and the faint, grateful gaze that made his chest tighten. And then, "Who gave you permission to touch my daughter?" The voice exploded like a grenade. Everyone turned. In that moment, the angel fell. Harrison Vanderbilt III emerged, storm-gray suit, perfectly tailored eyes, bloodshot mouth, twisted in a fury no one had seen before. He didn't look at his daughter. He looked at Eli as if staring at a filthy stain on an imported Italian tablecloth. No one spoke. No one defended Eli. The entire party seemed to silently agree with Harrison's rage because Eli had stepped beyond his role, beyond his permitted place. Eli stood there drenched and trembling. Not from fear, from something deeper, something far more dangerous. He stared straight into Harrison's eyes, and in that moment, Eli saw the truth about power. It wasn't confidence, it was fear of losing control. It wasn't strength, it was weakness hidden beneath layers of wealth. A cold clarity rose within him. His eyes no longer held the gaze of a servant, but of someone about to redraw the rules of the game. He said nothing, just nodded as if making a vow, not an apology, a memory. Eli turned and walked away, each step pounding the marble floor with the weight of contempt. Behind him, Harrison cradled his daughter not out of love, but as if shielding a possession that had been tainted. Sophia, the only soul in that crowd, turned her head toward Eli, her eyes still glistening with pool water, yet sparkling with gratitude. And there, in that moment of being treated like trash, an architect of justice began to draw his first blueprint. No one ever brought up that day again. No apology. No thank you message. Just a white envelope left neatly on the kitchen counter containing a unilateral termination letter. Sarah Washington was fired after 17 years of serving the Vanderbilt family. No reason given, no right to appeal. The next day, 3 restaurants rejected her job applications. 2 cleaning services suddenly stopped responding. Sarah didn't need to ask, she knew why. Harrison Vanderbilt III didn't get angry, he punished, and he knew how to do it in silence. Back at the oceanfront estate, Sophia was imprisoned in what seemed like luxury care. A room with a custom-made bed, a vanity mirror imported from Milan, but nothing beyond control. Her specialized voice communication device, the one that allowed her to interact with the world, was replaced with a cheap, outdated model. Her trusted physical therapist was reassigned for professional reasons. A new nurse was hired, polished, cold, expressionless, more like an extension of her father than a caregiver. Sophia didn't cry. She simply looked out the window, knowing that freedom was a luxurious illusion she had just lost. In Brooklyn, inside an aging 5th-floor apartment with yellowed ceilings and a water heater that often failed in winter, a war room was forming. Eli sat at the kitchen table, now covered with computer parts, cables, and flickering monitors. 3 old laptops had been soldered back to life, their screens fuzzy but functional. Much like him, imperfect, but not easily broken. Sarah cried, not because she lost her job, but because her son, the one who always kept his head down, who always knew his place, now sat in silence like a storm barely held back. Eli handed her a mug of cold tea. "Do you remember Grandpa?" He asked, his voice strangely calm. They said he would never own anything, but he didn't build a house to prove them wrong. He built a home to prove he was right. Sarah gripped his hand, and Eli was forging his weapon. Not a gun, not a blade, but truth. Data. Proof. He started with the things no one noticed: microtransactions, Vanderbilt Holdings' shell companies registered in Delaware with oddly repeated executive names, charity funds wired overseas only to return as investments. Eli didn't go to Harvard. He learned from underground hacker forums, from old library books, from bootlegged MIT lectures on YouTube. But most of all, he learned from being overlooked. Every time Harrison looked through him, every time someone called him that kid with the tablecloth, Eli remembered. And now he paid it back by deciphering what they thought no one could understand. One night, as he was mapping out the data web on his screen, Eli froze. His eyes widened. His heartbeat quickened. Eureka! It wasn't a wire transfer, not a forged document. It was a gateway. In his arrogance and obsession with control, Harrison had installed a full smart home system in the mansion: hidden cameras, living room microphones, smart locks, all synced to his personal phone. And he made the dumbest mistake: he believed no one would dare touch it. Eli didn't need to break the firewall. He traced back unsecured data packets being sent to a backup server one Harrison never updated, because it's just a copy. And in that instant, the door opened. The screen blinked. Eli was looking into the Vanderbilt living room, and he could hear what no one else ever had except Sophia. The first recording: "You don't understand, Sophia. People like them, the Washingtons, cling to us for reward. That boy saved you because he wants a better life, not because he's kind." Harrison's voice was cold as steel, coming from the man gently stroking his daughter's hair, like he was soothing a bird in a cage. Sophia didn't answer. She only bowed her head. But Eli knew in that moment her heart cracked. He leaned back in his chair. A strange feeling filled his chest. It wasn't triumph, not rage, but clarity, as if his entire forgotten life had led to this very second. Eli stared at the spiderweb of data on the screen. Each thread led to a dark node, an act of wrongdoing. A link in the empire of a man who never thought he could be challenged. He whispered, "You built walls to keep others out, Mr. Vanderbilt. but you forgot the greatest threat might come from within your own house. Eli put on his headphones. The screen glowed brightly. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the bystander. He was the architect, the one holding the match to a quiet revolution. Inside a walnut-paneled room, the gentle light from a crystal chandelier cast a false sense of peace. But Sophia Vanderbilt was living in a gilded prison. Her smart bed adjusted angles at the push of a button. The air purifier hummed softly like a breeze. But everything in this space had one thing in common: silence. Not just because of the soundproofing, but because everything was designed for control. The new nurse Linda was always punctual, always polite, and always avoided Sophia's eyes. But the girl didn't need pity. She needed a way out. Sophia began to observe, patiently. She learned that Linda once worked in a Queens housing unit, had a son in community college, a working woman just like Sarah Washington, the one who used to bring her homemade cookies every Sunday afternoon. And Sophia understood, to break out of this cage, she had to awaken the part of Linda that the system had buried. She didn't cry when insulted. She didn't resist when forced to eat. Instead, she chose her moment. One evening, Harrison's voice leaked from the room next door during a phone call echoing through the speaker. "I told you to fire all the black staff. I don't want them hovering around Sophia. Enough. I pay for loyalty, not compassion." Linda froze. One hand held the tray of meds, the other clenched. No one had trained her to respond to a sentence like that. Sophia looked her straight in the eyes. She said nothing, but her silence hit like a punch to the chest. From that day, Linda began to change. Softer, slower every time she entered or left the room. And one night, while checking the cameras, her finger brushed past the recording button. Right as Harrison roared, "She doesn't need love. She needs discipline." Linda said nothing. But the next morning, Sophia found a note under her pillow. One shaky line of handwriting: "Safe. Behind your grandfather's portrait. Code your mother's birthday." In Brooklyn, Eli was still building his network, but now he needed strategy, guidance, and someone unafraid of the truth. One name came to mind instantly: Dr. Anya Sharma. On a Monday morning, Eli walked into her lecture on journalism and the law. He didn't raise his hand. Didn't speak until the open discussion. Then he asked, "If a student uncovers hard evidence of corporate crime, but that evidence was obtained through a gray access path, would publishing it still count as defamation if the facts are true?" The room fell silent. Dr. Sharma stared at him. Her eyes lit up, not because she felt challenged, but because she recognized someone like herself. After class, she called him over. "You're not asking about the law," she said. "You're asking how to tell the truth without getting silenced." Eli nodded. "I don't want noise. I want consequences." Their private meeting happened right in her small, book-filled office lined with old cassette tapes. Eli opened his laptop, presented everything. No pleading, no excuses, just the truth. Clear, logical, data-driven. A web of money transfers, ties to New York State politicians, and audio from the smart home system. Dr. Sharma didn't speak much. She just opened a drawer. Pulled out a business card: David Chen, civil rights attorney. David Chen wasn't easily impressed. He'd sued oil giants, survived death threats, won cases against the FBI for surveillance abuse. But meeting Eli threw him off. Not because of the information, but because the architect of this plan was only 19. Eli laid it out like a symphony-timed submission of data to the SEC and FBI as the market opened. Controlled leaks to prevent media distraction. Creation of a website. The Vanderbilt papers modeled after the Panama Papers, but searchable and undeniable. Legal countermeasures are ready for when the other side sues back for a data breach. David sat in stunned silence, then finally said, "You don't need a lawyer to win. You need one to survive." The alliance was born. Sophia, with her handwritten ledger from the safe, provided the missing piece lists of anonymous accounts, bribes, educational sponsorships for politicians' children. Eli, the one who saw the big picture. Dr. Sharma, the one who shaped the message. David Chen, the one who built the legal fortress. Sunday night. Eli sent the encrypted message. To Sharma, Chen, Sophia message, "The storm is coming." Monday, 9:00 a.m. He sat alone in the dark in front of a wall of screens filled with data graphs and sound files. His hand hovered over the mouse. One click would change the entire order of an empire. On the screen, a photo of Sophia smiling, not the face of a victim, but the first ally, the one who believed in him when the world saw him as invisible. 8:59 a.m. Monday. In a sunlit office on the 47th floor of Vanderbilt Holdings, the communications assistant had just set down her espresso cup when the printer began to scream. From the grand lobby to the chief legal officer's desk, the internal servers simultaneously received an encrypted data packet marked urgent from SEC, 9 a.m. A website suddenly went live across every major news outlet. TheVanderbiltPapers.org. A perfectly formatted exposé, its tone cold and emotionless, but every word was true. Names of recipients, bank account numbers, scanned ledger pages, audio clips of Harrison's voice. Every line of data had a verified source. The signature at the end, anonymous. 9:01 a.m. In his lavish office overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, Harrison Vanderbilt III opened his laptop. A white screen greeted him with a single line, "You told me to know my place. This is it." A link was attached. One click, and then everything exploded. Joe 9:15, boardroom. An emergency meeting was called. The faces of board members turned pale as ash. They read the headlines from CNN, WSJ, Forbes, all screaming his name. Vanderbilt empire built on fraud, tax evasion, bribery, and exploitation. Leaked files shake New York's elite CEOs, secret recordings reveal pattern of racism and control. The chief legal officer trembled. The SEC, FBI, and IRS have all made contact. We're under full investigation. 09:30, the Hamptons estate. Sophia sat calmly in her wheelchair, hair neatly tied back, eyes wide but unnervingly steady. 3 agents from Child Protective Services were present. Linda stood beside her, not a nurse now, but a protector. With legal support from David Chen via video call, Sophia began her statement, not trembling, not crying. "I was denied access to my communication device. I was monitored 24/7 without medical justification. I was isolated from friends, teachers, and my therapist." A copy of the handwritten ledger was placed before the investigators. Linda testified. Sophia turned to the glass wall where the sea's light reflected off the portrait of her grandfather. "Behind that painting is the evidence. He taught me how to hide it. I just learned from him." 10:05, Harrison's office. The door burst open. 2 FBI agents stepped in, warrant in hand. Harrison jumped to his feet, eyes bloodshot, jacket, discarded hands visibly shaking. I am Harrison Vanderbilt. I advise 3 New York governors." One agent replied with a single sentence, "And you're being charged with 17 federal criminal offenses." On the news footage aired of Harrison in handcuffs escorted past a mob of reporters. Flashbulbs exploded like gunfire. His face was a mix of disbelief, collapse, and shattered pride. A man who once controlled political empires, now crushed by the very system he believed would never turn on him. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, the small apartment. Sarah Washington sat on a chair, clutching her eyes locked on the screen. Eli stood behind her, silent. The television's glow reflected on his face, a quiet architect of truth, now watching a tower of power crumble exactly as he had designed. Sarah turned to her son. "You did what no one else dared to do." Eli gently closed his laptop. Calm, final. "I didn't destroy his empire. He built it on lies. I just turned on the lights." On the Vanderbilt paper's website, traffic surpassed 20 million in under 3 hours. Civil rights organizations reposted the investigation. Lawmakers voiced public support for Sophia. The media didn't call Eli a hacker. They called him the one who rewrote the order. Silence returned. But this time it wasn't deafening. It was peaceful. The peace of justice not born from power, but from the courage and brilliance of those once deemed invisible. 3 years later, Cambridge, Massachusetts, October. Maple leaves are scattered along the walkway leading into a glass building at MIT, but the light inside didn't come from the ceiling. It came from minds at work, from ideas forming, from boundaries being pushed. And at the center of it all stood Eli Washington. Not a student, not a professor. He was the founder of the Washington Initiative, a rising nonprofit teaching students of engineering and investigative journalism how to use data to confront abuse of power. He had turned down every offer from Silicon Valley. No Meta, no Palantir, no corner office or $1 million salary. Instead, he chose a small office near a train station, its door always open where boys from the outskirts could walk in and ask about digital forensics, like they would ask about basketball. Eli was no longer invisible, but he had never truly stepped forward either. No one knew for certain who had exposed the Vanderbilt papers. Only a few, Sophia, Dr. Sharma, David Chen, knew, and none ever broke that sacred silence. Sophia Vanderbilt now lives in California studying psychology and disability law at Stanford. Under the guardianship of a new foster family, one that treated her as a daughter, not an inheritance, she was reborn. She started blogging, sharing her experiences about living with disability, about being silenced, and how she reclaimed her voice. One of her essays, "The Cage Was Velvet," was published by The New Yorker and became required reading in human rights classes. As for Harrison Vanderbilt III, no more seats on philanthropic boards, no more honorary lectures at Ivy League schools. A clip once went viral, an old man, hair silver, in a federal prison uniform, silently reading a newspaper. The front page, the rise of a new generation of watchdogs inside the Washington Initiative. Harrison didn't react. He didn't speak. He simply folded the paper and stared at nothing. He had lost not because Eli was too brilliant, but because he never learned to respect the dignity of others. Then came November. A TED Talk in Chicago. The lights dimmed. Eli walked onto the stage in a plain gray shirt. No brands, no show. But the moment he spoke, the room held its breath. I was told to know my place. Behind the kitchen, next to the trash bins, beneath surveillance. And then one day, I broke a rule not by committing a crime, but by saving a life. The silence in the room was absolute. I was punished not for doing wrong, but for touching the daughter of a powerful man. From that day forward, I stopped climbing their ladder. I built my own. Because real power isn't the ability to silence others, it's the ability to give voice to those who've never had one. And I started with myself. He closed with the words he once told his mother, "Mom, I don't want to build an empire. I just want to build a place where no one has to bow their head." The applause that followed wasn't just praise, it was release. A woman wept. A student scribbled notes like they were recording history. Eli stepped down from the stage, and there she was, front row Sarah Washington. Her hair had turned silver, but her smile hadn't changed. It was warm, proud, unshaken. They embraced no words needed. At a weekend class for underprivileged kids in Boston, a brown-skinned boy raised his hand. "Mr. Eli, what do you do if the world always sees you as less?" Eli knelt beside him and met his eyes. "Then you rewrite the definition of worth and use your life to prove it." The afternoon light poured through the classroom windows. On the blackboard in white chalk, someone had written, "Justice isn't inherited. It's built." One story ends, a legacy begins. Because justice doesn't come from power, it comes from the courage and brilliance of those who were once unseen. Sometimes you don't have to destroy the system. You just have to turn on the light and let the truth speak for itself. If this story touched you, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs a spark of hope, and subscribe to Toch Story for more journeys of emotion, justice, and truth. Thank you for staying until the very end.